Hello, my friends. It's Adam Hebener here again, CEO of Modern Mortgage, and coming to you with another Modern Minute. And just a reminder, this section of Modern Minutes, this whole series we're doing, is all about deflation, and it's helping you understand my thesis that we are in a deflationary period and that your behaviors need to be catered financially and economically to a deflationary environment so that you can not just get through it chattering your teeth and scared the whole time, but instead I want you to feel like you're equipped to thrive as we move through deflation. So in order to do that, I've already done one video on what deflation is, what it looks like, what it feels like when you look around in the economy. It's not a technical video. I didn't include a bunch of economic formulas. All I did was kind of describe what it would feel like if you're observing deflation, and I think it does describe the environment that we're probably in right now. In this video, I want to talk, instead of just about what deflation is, I want to help you understand why I believe we're in a deflationary environment. And that is so important because all the headlines you're reading are all about inflation. You've got people telling you have to buy this or buy that to protect yourself from inflation, or they're telling you kind of what long-term behaviors look like. And I want you to know, I actually agree in the long term that we are looking at an inflationary environment. But this deflationary environment is potentially years long. And so you have to be able to endure and kind of understand the rules of the game so that you can thrive in a deflationary environment in order to be ready to take advantage of that inflationary environment, which I believe is coming later. So again, my goal here is to equip you so you can get past all of that stuff. So let's talk about why I think we're in a deflationary environment. Well, there's a couple of reasons. The main causes to deflation, there are several inputs that create deflation. And they begin most broadly with just the number of people there are to do work, which we call gross domestic, which we call demography, just the number of people. And demography is a major input into gross domestic product. So just the number of workers we have available working at any given time is a function of, that is, it's an element of, an ingredient of, what creates our gross domestic product. So we're going to talk a little bit about our current demography, the demography of the United States, and the demography of the entire world. The second thing we're going to look at is kind of some of the other major inputs, energy costs, things like technology, its effect on deflation. And then very, very importantly, we're going to talk about how all of the debt that's being put into the U.S. economy and really the global economy affects deflation, and I am going to argue that it actually even causes and exacerbates deflation. And so let's get into that stuff. When we start thinking about the population demographics of the United States, I want you to understand that the demographics of the United States are currently flat. That means we're not growing. Now, the good news is we're not shrinking as a nation either, but because we are not growing, that limits our ability to grow our economy. And that makes sense. If we had to push a rock up the hill, we could push a bigger rock if we had more people to push that rock. So the number of people you have determines the size of rock you can move. Now, the rock in this case stands in for just the idea of work. How much work can be completed is absolutely a function of the number of people who live in any given culture. So in the United States, the growth rate for the United States is around 0.48%. That means it's growing just a little bit. It grew about 0.5% as of last year. And that's not bad when you consider the rest of the world. Europe grew at about 0.2%, so they grow a little slower than we do. China, as a matter of fact, you hear all this information about China being a big source of risk for us, that they're the future of the world. I actually do not believe that China is the future of the world. When we look at the Chinese demographics, what you'll see is they've got slightly negative demographics. That means they've got an older population than we do, and that older population is growing even slower than our population is growing. So they're just under zero for their population growth last year. Japan, as an example, is well under zero, negative 2%. So pretty substantial decline in their population. So just that basic macroeconomic input makes it really difficult for the economy to continue to grow. That is deflationary. Now add to that technology. Technology is a wonderful thing. It makes life really good, but technology is making a quantum leap from where it has been into where it's now headed. What technology has been over the last 20, 30 years is kind of novel, interesting. It's improving things. Think about just the cell phone sector, for instance. We've only had cell phones since about 2009, smartphones, I should say. Arguably, you could say there was kind of some early iterations in 2007, but 2009 is really when we started to see major adoption. Well, when that happens, I want you to think about all the things that are no longer needed as a result of your cell phone. You really don't need to carry much of a wallet anymore. You really don't need a flashlight. You don't need a tape measure. You don't need a camera anymore. Remember all those things you used to buy and keep in your house? Now you just keep them in your cell phone. And as a result of having all of those items in one place, technology has given us the ability to have a great phone which can do incredible things, but it has also limited the need for us to make things like flashlights and tape measurers and all the other things, cameras and all the other things that our cell phones can now do. Well, that's been interesting and novel, but as it's eliminated all those other inputs to the economy, it has been deflationary. The difference is that it's been deflationary so far on kind of a minor curve. Now, when you think about cell phones, just take, for instance, Apple and Samsung, the two major contributors to the cell phone market. The competition between those two has improved processor speeds and cameras and technology and apps. All the improvements have been made as a result of the competition between those two, but prices have dropped. That's deflationary. And they've dropped because they've become more efficient at making them. Well, you say, well, Adam, these are very good things. Why would this be bad for the economy? Well, ultimately, in 10 years, these are good things for the economy. But during this bridge, as I've described for you, this is pretty negative for the economy. Because what do we do with the guys who used to make the digital cameras and the guys who used to make the flashlights and the people who used to make the measuring devices? Those are no longer needed. Those factories go out of business, and if you do a little research, you'll find those factories have gone out of business. They've laid off their employees, they've gone bankrupt. Well, in this early period of technology has advanced very, very quickly. According to Moore's Law, which is something you can look up if you don't know it, Moore's Law indicates the speed of technology. And it's fascinating to watch how much good that has brought in. But now technology is making a huge leap. And that huge leap is that it's moving into every sector. Instead of just its own improved gadgetry sector, it's now moving into everything. And as it moves into everything, it eliminates the need for lots of other kinds of sectors. Well, again, ultimately, that's a good thing, but in the short run, it's very deflationary. It does cause jobs to be lost, and as I've described before, once those jobs are lost, now you've got a pretty serious problem because you lose the consumers who would otherwise consume that information. Now add to this, the cost of energy is substantially reducing. So things like fossil fuels, we're getting very, very good at extracting fossil fuels from the ground. That's a very good thing. I'm very proud of the United States being energy independent. This is wonderful news. Fracking, things like that bring about very, very good ultimate consequences. But in the short term, they eliminate a lot of jobs. Now add to the reduction in the cost of oil. You say, well, Adam, why does this matter? Well, here's why. Because oil is an input into just about everything in the economy. So every product, every bucket of paint, every paintbrush, every lamp, every chair, every computer, everything in your life is brought to you as a result of oil. And when the price of that oil drops, the price of those goods also drops. Now you say, well, again, isn't this good? It's good when it happens in isolation, but when it happens across the economy, it creates this vicious cycle, what we call a negative feedback loop, and it eliminates jobs and causes lower costs. The advent, the rise of very cheap solar, if you haven't been watching curves on solar, take a look. Google the cost of solar. Solar has moved from about $2,000 per kilowatt hour back in the 70s, used to cost $2,000 to make a kilowatt hour, to today, 18 cents is about what it costs to make a kilowatt hour. So that drastic collapse in costs means that as solar improves, it replaces fossil fuels and other things as a source of cost, makes energy very, very low cost. Again, good thing ultimately, but in the short term, not a good thing because it reduces the value of all goods and services across the economy and therefore creates large unemployment, which creates the feedback cycle that starts to destroy consumption and the GDP drops. Now, this is not just happening in the United States, it's happening across the globe, and it's happening in bigger and worse ways. Now, I keep telling you, ultimately deflation is good, but in the short term it's bad. Well, why is it bad? Well, there's only one reason why deflation is bad. Tomorrow, if I told you your wages were going to get cut by 50%, you would say, well, this is a very bad thing, unless I then came and said, well, your cost of living is going to go down by 70%. If that were the case, you'd say, okay, well, hey, I'm going to earn less, but I'm going to spend way less. I'll probably have the same or higher quality of living. I would tell you that's true, and that's what you can expect later. But in the meantime, we have a big problem, and that big problem is debt. There is simply too much debt on planet Earth. I'm going to do a second video talking to you about what government debt does and how it affects the savings rate and so forth, and we'll compare that so you can understand. But you need to understand for this video, as we produce all this debt is now going to have to be paid back in deflated dollars. So our debts are not going to go down even though our wages will. And that is what creates all of the turmoil in a deflationary environment. You say, well, Adam, how do you know this? I know because history. That's the answer, because history. We had a very small deflationary environment in the 70s. You can ask President Carter about what that looked like and why he only had one term. You can go back a little bit further back into the 1930s and beginning in 1929 through the late 30s. A little period in the United States we call the Great Depression. That was a deflationary environment. And it was brought about as a result of just the inputs that I'm describing. Now, they didn't have technology in the form that we think of it now, but they did have the Industrial Revolution, which we began for the United States, if you'll remember, about 30 years earlier, just like our tech revolution began about 30 years ago. So these kinds of things do move in predictable cycles, and they make pretty tough periods when they come about. So I'm going to be doing more videos helping you understand why I believe we're in this deflationary environment. I hope I'm giving you some compelling, and when I say compelling, what I mean is observable phenomenon that are contributing to the deflation that you should be seeing around you. If I'm right, what you see is rising unemployment, you see rising savings rate in people, more spending in the government, more uncertainty about the future, and you and your neighbor's behavior is probably tightening your belt, probably consuming a little less. And that's why the government's working so hard to get you to spend more money. So I'm going to continue to help explain all of this information. I hope this is helpful for you. Please continue to give us feedback, like, share, subscribe, ask questions, talk to us about what you need to know. We really want to help you navigate this process as best we can. So watch for the next video, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.